Eddie was mentioning, and I've kind of lived on a similar corner to Kay, maybe a little bit different most of my career. I've lived on the corner of analytics, technology to really scale out analytics primarily, and business value. So really my big drive in life and career has been creating new value. I've lived in the corporate sector pretty much my entire life. And really some of the things I took away from the education was, stats is really a mindset. Kay touched on this with, information is key to making decisions. And when you're working in large multinational global companies, information is really the lifeblood, because a lot of people can have opinions, a lot of people can have beliefs. At the end of the day, it's the information and the analysis that really tells you what's valuable and where the company needs to go. The thing I've loved about analytics is in doing that sort of analysis, you can use new data to expose new opportunities. You can look at the analysis differently to see new opportunity. And at the end of the day, competitive advantage in companies is all driven by seeing the future before your competition and or creating the future before the competition. And that's exactly what analytics is focused on. I'll tell you, my career is essentially a byproduct of what I wanted to get done. I've really not spent and never spend much time thinking about career, but I spend a heck of a lot of time thinking about what I want to get done and why. I'll give you some examples. When I first started at Monsanto about a little bit over 20 years ago, I was kind of thrown into a group of mavericks that was really a really small group of mavericks, I might add. There was really 2 or 3 of us at the beginning, and we were put in this group to invent molecular breeding. And at that point in time, molecular breeding didn't really exist. If it did, you could manipulate essentially one population, one breeding population. So we got to work to invent, okay, how would we do this? Is it worth doing? Does it create any advantage for the company? That was a big part of my formative years, was figuring that out, developing haplotype-based breeding, proving the value to the company, and ultimately we switched all of the breeding efforts to be molecular-based. In doing that, what it really meant was we needed IT systems that were capable of doing that. Hundreds of breeding programs, at that point in time probably about a dozen crops. So we needed to scale that technology out, because technology unscaled is essentially useless. So at that point I joined the IT group, and really I was probably the first person with a domain background, domain in breeding, to join the IT group. And I ended up leading that group for the company. All of R&D, information technology, was what I led. And we scaled that technology out, and while there, we started looking at predictive technology. And it was kind of fun because back then it wasn't called machine learning, it barely existed. There were a few seminal approaches, and we said, well, let's see if there's anything to this, see if this is useful. And we started looking at our breeding pipeline and saying, well, can I predict which ones are the best hybrids to advance? And can I look at which hybrids ultimately are going to make the most money for the company? What create the most value in the marketplace? And can I do that many years in advance? The breeding pipeline cost hundreds of millions of dollars a year to run. And if we could focus that better, it was a large outcome for us. Interestingly, I hired 2 or 3 people and set them to work on that, and really in very short order we proved, yeah, you can. And in fact, probably half the breeding pipeline you could predict was never going to create commercial value very accurately. And that was a big outcome when you're spending that amount of money, and the profitability of the company is essentially that. So at that point I moved back in and ran what was called trade integration for the company, which is where all the transgenic events get put in the commercial lineup. So everything the company sold from a germplasm viewpoint went through this pipeline globally. And that's where we really united this predictive technology with the company's pipeline, so that we could create the products that matter the most to farmers, having the best trait genetics. So super valuable. In doing all of these technology upgrades, you end up focusing a lot on the technology and a lot on the organisation, because the speed at which you can move is often slowed down by the human element. So getting people to really see the future, see themselves in the future, is where you often spend a lot of time. After running trade integration for the company, we then started thinking about, well, we're creating these great products with great genetics. How are our farmer customers really using these products, and are they creating the most economic benefit from them for themselves? And we started looking at the data, and again, what the data told us was, well, there's $1 billion opportunity here for us to do better. And that was the birth of digital ag for the company. And I moved into the digital ag group, again, a fairly small division that was really put in place to revolutionise what we were doing. And we ended up commercialising the first machine learning application to place products, to help growers inform which products to purchase, what portfolio of products, much like a financial decision you might have for stocks and shares, and then how to manage those products, what density to plant them at, when to harvest them. That was hugely successful, and it actually gave us the opportunity to rethink the entire seed industry, which predominantly is driven by selling seed, a bag of seed. So you buy a bag of seed, and that's how the seed companies sell their products. And what we found was this value we were creating. Obviously, as a company, you need to share in the value you're creating. So what we wanted to do was switch that to an outcome-based pricing methodology, to where companies like Monsanto or Bayer would share the risk of the products being purchased, and also sharing the gains of the products being purchased based on their yield at the end of the year. Huge step. That's still being figured out, but currently it's on a few 100,000 acres. During that time period, I really looked at all of these technologies and started thinking a ton of application in ag, also a ton of applications in other industries. And that's kind of the beauty of looking in technology and analytics, is you're not bounded by an industry. So at that point I moved out to OCI to start leading a business, creating a business for OCI, where we work with a lot of different industries, including some mining industries in Australia, retail industries, ag industries as well. And using this exact same sort of approach to how can we bring technologies to companies much faster, using the expertise we've gained. In terms of the experience that have led to this sort of career, I think the big ones are, and Kay touched on this too, is find what you love to do. It takes a heck of a lot of effort and time to become good at what you do. So you better enjoy it, because if you don't enjoy it, it's drudgery. And then I think one of the things I've learned along the way is, I've learned this about myself and a lot of people that I've managed as well, is learn what you're really good at, And that sounds like a really easy question, but most people get it wrong. Because the thing you're really good at comes naturally. Often you can overlook it. It's the thing you do really easily. Often it's the thing where you look at other people and you think, why are they struggling with that? This seems really easy to me. That's probably the thing you're really good at. And when you build a career around what you're good at, your strengths, A, you enjoy it, and B, it's kind of a lot easier and a lot more fun. So I know over the years I've kind of, been kind of self-observant on things that, what do I not put down? What am I always picking up a book on? What am I reading on? What am I obsessed over? I'm kind of an obsessive personality, so, that always helps to drive success. And the other thing I'd say is, do you. Always be authentic. Just, find what your brand is, what you stand for, what you want people to understand and remember about you, and be authentic to that. Don't try and fit into the world around you. People will remember what you do, and you want them to remember that. My role has always been to build really great teams. Which means that I've had to be very empathetic because no one's really on their A game every day, and my hiring philosophy has always been bring in someone that's better than everyone else on the team at something, and that doesn't really lead to a great job description. I'm always on the lookout for someone who thinks a little differently, has a skill the rest of the team isn't that good at. Someone who can really catapult us forward. And that's always been my hiring philosophy. Finding a company that you admire, I think, is important. I've always worked for companies that I admire. There's no perfect match in this. And at the end of the day, you'll have to do work on yourself to fit in and work on the company. As I look at the impact, one person can have on a company, almost all of the big shifts have come from 2 or 3 people. This is companies of 20,000, 30,000 people. Initially it comes from a couple of people, ultimately thousands of people have to do what you've invented or what the new direction is. But that power of one is super important. In terms of skills and kind of what to expect, I think that the hard skills, the hard lessons learned at university are super useful. I think the softer skills in terms of how you approach problems, how you think about problems, are likely the ones that have more longevity. The reality is what I learned about breeding at university. We've reinvented at least 2 times, if not 3, and if I was still doing what I learned, I'd probably be an antique. But the reality is how you think about those problems, how you think through them, that remains. So with that in mind, being curious is super important. And, a lot of us are curious in some aspects of our lives. I'd encourage you to be super curious about things at work. The people who go far are often the ones who come in the morning and say, hey, I've been thinking about this all night. I've tried a few different ways of doing it, and here's something I've learned that I think's useful to us, and that's driven by curiosity and passion. And that's really what propels companies and organisations forward. Another thing I keep in mind is, often you do the job before you get the job, and a lot of us kind of grow up with this romantic notion at least I think it's romantic, that the boss is going to come in and say, hey, you've got this really great big promotion, you've never done any of it before and it's going to be fantastic. And that may happen, it never happened on my watch, it never happened to me. What's more natural is you give people part of the job you want them to do, part of the career advancement, and by the time you're actually giving them the entire job, they're already doing it. And you know what that means is you're always leaving value on the table. And I think you've just got to be comfortable with that. That's the way you progress in life. And it's certainly been something I've done, certainly something I still do, and I think it works well because and if you can take some of the more routine tasks or the things that they struggle with off their plate, that frees them up to create more value. You know, the other thing I'd say is, you know, networks is super important. I think, you know, we've heard people talk about a lot of others and their impact on their careers, and you know, having a network and actively participating in that network is super important. A lot of the people sitting next to you today will probably go on and run large organisations and be really successful in their careers, and the bonds you form early on stay with you throughout a career. In terms of lessons learned, I'll give you a couple. You know, I'm a fairly conservative person by nature. I like to understand the risks and rewards. You know, I like to analyse things, and you know, if I'm ever seen to be moving fast, it's because I've done all the homework and people just don't know about it. So the learning here is, you know, dreaming bigger and acting bolder. I worked for Rob Fraley for a lot of years. He ran R&D for Monsanto, and you know, Rob would always say, we can't think big enough, we can't move fast enough. And that was his way of encouraging bigger thinking, more impactful thinking. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to move the needle in a big company, they have to be big dreams. So dreaming bigger and acting bolder, I think is something that's a mindset. It can be learned. Anything can be learned. Next one is, you know, touched on it before, connections really matter. You know, I left a Fortune 500 company and, you know, decided to start up a business in a, you know, mid-sized technology company, and that was a big shift. Networks matter because, you know, everyone from my former team then reached out and said, hey, can I come work for you? And ended up hiring quite a few people that, you know, we worked together for 5-10 years before that. And, you know, bringing A players out of a Fortune 500 to a mid-sized technology company is not something that happens every day. So that was purely driven by them knowing my brand and them having trust in me as a leader. So, you know, in summary, I'll give you a quick summary of kind of my key points here. First and foremost, find your passion. Do something you love, do something you enjoy, do something that ignites a fire within. Going through the motions ain't worth it. Next thing, stay curious, be curious. If you aren't a curious person, get curious about being curious. Curiosity is a learned skill. If you want to be curious and focus on it, you can learn to do that. That will drive career success for you. Build a network. You know, be conscious about networking. Dream big. Again, a skill that can be learned. If you're going to have a big impact in the world, like, you know, Kay was saying earlier, if you can control everything you're dreaming about, the dream's not big enough by definition. And you have to be able to work through and with others, get them inspired by the dream, help share the dream and shape the dream. And I'll come on here with one final thought is, You know, the thing that I've loved about analytics and information technology throughout my career is it's a vehicle for innovation. It's a way of looking at what people are doing and freeing yourself from the mundane. The ability to move to the next frontier is super important, and that's what separates companies, and that's always what's driven me. So for me, it's been a fantastic career, and it's one that I'm still in, and it's taken a lot of different turns along the way, from straight analytics to straight information technology to working in businesses to doing all three simultaneously. So super cool. I wish you all the success in the world. So thanks.